Hello and welcome to TomBecka.com, where everyone's exceptional and everyone has a story to tell. And before we get to today's story, I want to thank you all for spreading the word on this site, spreading the word about these podcasts. Every Sunday, there's a new person that you're going to meet, maybe a person that you may not get a chance to meet in your everyday life, but somebody that I think you'll find very interesting, especially if you love movies, if you love the classic movies, if you love Hollywood. This guy is right up your alley. Bruce Crawford is a man who's been able to take his passion for film and his love of film and turn it into his career. What he does is he takes Hollywood blockbuster movies, the old ones, the ones that you just don't see on the big screen anymore, and he puts them on the big screen as fundraisers for various charities. And through this, he's been able to meet a number of his Hollywood heroes, people that he's always admired and respected over the years. He's been able to meet them and talk to them about the film, talk to them about the whole process, and talk to them about some of the great movies that have helped shape our lives and shape the attitudes of America. And so as we get ready now for Hollywood, we get ready for Academy Awards and Golden Globes and all the big awards season, I thought it'd be good to talk to Bruce about Hollywood, where it's been, and I guess more importantly, where it's going. And since nobody really knows for sure where it's going, I thought I'd start off by asking him an easy question about where it's been. What makes a great movie?
Well, that's like a Rorschach test. What you see may not be what I see, But I think if you wanted to give it in general terms, what holds up over time? What's just as entertaining now as it was when it was made? And does not that it can't date, because, even the great masters of art, Van Gogh or something, well, that was popular at that time that he did the painting, but it still has its value and holds up its popularity today, but you can still tell when it was done or like an era type of thing. I think that's true with movies, and that, and any art form for that matter, is does it hold the test of time? Does it still entertain you or entertain people today like it did when it first came out? I think that's probably the real test.
Okay, so you couldn't take a movie today and say that this movie is going to be a classic 30 years from now. And I'll tell you why I asked this. I saw recently, I don't know, a few months back or whatever, I saw The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. And I remember when The Exorcist came out. Right. It was, scared the hell out of me, right?
Yeah, me too.
And then, I see it all these years later, and it was comical.
Well, that's a tough one, because I saw it re-released theatrically in 1999, which is 25 years after it came out. Mm-hmm. But I saw it back on a big screen again with an audience, and it still had an impact on me. I think if it's seen in your own home, on your own TV or your own big screen, whatever, not quite the same. I think that might be an exception to the rule, because I think that when you saw it alone in your home, did you see it with other people?
Yeah, it was on cable or something, yeah.
Well, it's different. When you see it in the theater in a communal setting, with people on a big movie screen. Because I saw it back again, my wife at the time and a good friend of mine, we all three went to go see it at the Cinema Center. And it was playing in the late summer, I think, early fall of 1999. It had been 25 years almost, over 25 years since it had come out at that point. That's been an old movie then. Yeah. And it still jarred us. And the audience still, even though he knew it was coming, it still had an impact. So that may not be the best example. Maybe for you it made it that way because you saw it on TV, and it just something was diminished when it was shrunk down, and you weren't with a large audience that was freaking out. That may be part of it. That's just my theory.
No, that's interesting because you're right. I mean, my background is comedy, and right. I know that if comedy is not in the right setting, right, stuff that would be funny 99% of the time. But if the lighting's not right, if the stage's not right, if the mic isn't right, it doesn't play.
It falls flat.
So movies, as much as we talk now about big screen TVs, high definition, all this stuff, movies really do need to be seen in a theater, right?
Well, if they're designed for that in the first place, it's like a TV film, for example, or a TV show there's been rare occasions when TV shows have been blown up on a big movie screen, and they don't work because it was not meant to be seen with that much detail where you can see flaws or mistakes or it falls flat, whereas on television it works better. Imagine a comedy show with a laugh track and on a big screen and audience, well, there's laugh tracks coming out of the speakers before you get a chance. That just wouldn't work, would it? It'd be disconcerting. Whereas in the case of motion pictures that are designed to be seen theatrically on a big screen, that's the whole point. Something is lost almost in all movies that are designed for the big screen. Something is lost when it goes to television. Now today, with the advent of HBO and the pay cable and DVD and Blu-ray and that kind of thing, home video, they're done both. They're both sometimes designed for both the big and small, but something is still lost, I think, because when you see it on a large screen, not only is it communal because you have a large audience with you, but you also, your eyes wandering across the screen where you're taking in the detail. You're seeing something on the left side and the right side, and you're seeing the whole thing in a whole different manner. I really can't describe it to you better than that because I think it's more of a psychological impact than anything else.
You know, you talk about seeing it in a communal theater like that sort of a setting. I'm thinking about how movie theaters have changed over the years.
Yeah.
The old, they go back to like, the 40s and the 30s and 40s, those old theaters, and now you've got the megaplexes with dinner and booze and all of that.
Yeah.
Is it because and the new technology? Is it tougher and tougher to get people to go to the movies? In other words, is it tougher and tougher to get them actually in the theater?
Exactly, because I think we've spoken about this before. I think I have a 65-inch plasma TV at home, and that's huge. And it's maybe at the most maybe 8 or 10, maybe 10 feet away from the couch. And the area of vision it gives me is almost like a 50-foot screen would be in a 300 or 400 seat theater. So it's almost the same impact. Mm-hmm. And when you have that in your home, it's kind of hard to get people to go out to do otherwise, unless you have like IMAX and the 3D thing. That's what's old is new again, because 3D was in the early 50s to draw people away from television. So it's kind of like what's old is new again. So yeah, it gets more difficult with technology in your own home, and also because the quality of the films just isn't there either to draw people out. For every Lincoln that's out there, there's "Hey dude, where's my car?" And so that's a big part of it, is the quality just isn't there either.
Well, because they can make easy money on "Hey dude, where's my car?" Yeah. And it takes a real genius or a craftsman like a Spielberg to put and the acting of that Daniel Day-Lewis and all that to be able to put together a movie like Lincoln.
Exactly,
it's part of the problem too. And I've often wondered this: do you think that with all these with all the test marketing and the way that they have an audience look to see how the ending plays and everything, does that tend to dumb down the movies by the fact that they look at it from a position of marketing as opposed to a position of art?
Absolutely. Because the filmmakers of the past, the ones I like to honor in our events here, are artists and artisans. And they're also businessmen. They're both left and right brained. You have to be. You have to be creative, and you also have to be sharp on the business side. You got to be both, or you're not going to last very long. And today, though, they do last in the sense that they may not be artistically creative, but they are definitely business-minded, and it's all marketing. And the films, most of them, I'd say as much as 80% or more, I may be generous with that, are not going to be looked upon like the classics we revere, like the Gone with the Winds and the Ben-Hurs and the Hitchcock classics and what have you. You're not going to see that 50 years from now. There's not going to be a draw for the films, many of the films today. It's all done with marketing. It's all about the bottom line. It's not being, the film industry and probably the music industry too is not really being run by people who necessarily love the industry as much as the ones who had it before.
What about though, like with the new media? In other words, are people that love the filmmaking, are they doing stuff on YouTube? Are they putting stuff out in maybe the more non-traditional ways? Or independent films have really gotten big in the last number of years.
Well, they're independent films. That's the technology has helped with independent films certainly, but also the reason why some of the independent films have flourished is because people are starved for quality entertainment. Not that all independent films are going to be Citizen Kane or whatever, but there's more opportunity for a wider base of selection of different types of stories that would be more appealing to, other than the nonstop action explosions, CGI junk that's out there. And it is, a lot of it's just junk. The comic book superheroes. I mean, how many movies can you see? How many Spider-Mans can you watch? They're all the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to get in my soapbox here in a second and tell you that I'll have friends who'll drag me to these things. And I actually I must be becoming an old codger, because I actually find myself nodding off, going to sleep. I'm so bored by the nonstop explosions, 8-frame film editing, attention deficit disorder inducing comic books. They're the same story with a different face. It seems like cookie cutter films. It's really sad. And the reason why that gets going is because it goes well in the foreign market. You don't need much English translation for that.
Yeah, it is about the foreign market and those things, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Because if it's a Meryl Streep, a lot of dialogue movie, that takes a lot of money to translate, and it doesn't translate as well. But on the other hand, everybody likes to see a superhero blow something up.
They have their place, but we're inundated. My God, from May until September, it's nonstop. I may rub some of your listeners the wrong way with this, but there was a film I saw, and I went to see it because it was dedicated, I don't know what he'd have thought about it, dedicated to Ray Harryhausen. I think it was called Pacific Rim. And I could not I couldn't bear to watch it. It was just, I don't know if you saw this or not, but it's just, I was just beat over the head with explosions and loud sound. I had to put my fingers in my ears and nonstop CGI creature monster action. And I thought if Ray were alive and saw that, I don't think he'd find that necessarily an honor to have his name as dedicated to it, because it was just absolutely mind-numbing and pointless, go-nowhere movie. It was unbelievable to me.
And Ray Harryhausen, people that don't know, was an incredible special effects guy in the movies, right?
He's probably considered on the level with Walt Disney as one of the most influential filmmakers of the fantasy that's ever been.
What was he in? What movies did he do?
Well, of course, probably the most influential ones for the head of Industrial Light and Magic, George Lucas. They always pointed to the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad from 1958, Jason the Argonauts, the Seven Skeleton Sword Battle. Clash of the Titans, 1981 with Laurence Olivier they remade 2 or 3 sequels to that because it's so very popular. But his visual effects have influenced a lot of people. And then this Pacific Rim, what came out, Guillermo del Toro, I had the pleasure of meeting once. Nice man, but boy, the movie was just it was just nonsensical. You couldn't follow it. It was just it was just bizarre. This massive special effects explosions everywhere, and they dedicated it to him. Like I said, I don't think he'd be too thrilled with that because it was just sort of a mishmash. But that's where we've come to now. His films, many of the classics like the Sinbad and the Mysterious Island, the Jules Verne, Jason the Argonauts, had great stories based on great literature. Great based on their Arabian Nights. Great literature and mythology, and they had great stories to tell. It's about storytelling, and then the visual effects came afterwards. Whereas today, it's the visual effects, the explosions, and the heck with the storytelling. If there's a story, well, we're lucky.
Yeah. Okay. So you were talking about what is a great movie, a classic movie, one that holds the test of time. Is there a certain genre that'll hold the test of time? In other words, I keep thinking about how like comedies always get slighted as far as if you list what's the greatest movies of all time. Citizen Kane gets mentioned. Gone with the Wind gets mentioned. It's never Animal House.
Well, there are a few comedies that do get listed there, like Bringing Up Baby, of course, is always listed as one of the great comedies of all time with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. And Mel Brooks, some of his films, certainly Young Frankenstein and The Producers, are pretty much timeless classics.
You couldn't do some of the Mel Brooks movies
today. You couldn't do Blazing
Saddles.
Saddles.
You couldn't do Blazing Saddles.
And I love Blazing Saddles, but it is dated. And that you can tell that's mid-'70s. And the things that were said are totally not politically correct. But I love the movie. I look at it now as a film, not that it's dated in the sense, but I think of it as a Western comedy made in the mid-'70s. And if you keep that in your head, then you can enjoy it better. If you look at it now, well, that's so dated. Well, because it was a comedy of its time. Mm-hmm. But you have to put yourself in that mind frame. But you're right, though. That could not be, oh, my gosh. Can you imagine the protest that would create from that film now?
Yeah. And I've always found that interesting in that, some of the stuff, how tastes change and things that are considered classic couldn't be done today.
Many of them. And part of that is not only because of politically correct, like with Blazing Saddles, for example, but the talent's not there. You don't have the William Wylers and the David Leans and the John Hustons, Orson Welles. Not that their films are pretentious. Some people look at Wells being pretentious because as art, but there are films like William Wyler, who one of the most revered directors in history, with obviously Ben-Hur and Funny Girl and The Big Country, Best Years of Our Lives, Wuthering Heights, Roman Holiday. Those are great movies.
Yeah.
They're beautiful films, masterpieces in their own genres. But you're right, they hold the test of time. Films today, I can't think of... with the exceptions, there are exceptions like Lincoln. Definitely is a film of the ages. That was when I saw that, I was blown away by Lincoln. There are exceptions to that rule, and there was a science fiction, mind-boggling type films that are not mind-boggling, mind-bending films. Did you see Inception?
No.
I recommend you see Inception. That'll warp your brain a little bit, and make you think of it. And the Adjustment Bureau. Those are superb films. They're the science fiction ilk, but they're not nonstop explosions. There's some CGI, but not this 8-frame editing and attention deficit disorder-inducing type filmmaking we have today.
What do you mean 8-frame editing? What do you mean?
Well, it's just so fast you can't follow it.
Okay.
It just goes boom, 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 boom. It's because MTV has really dumbed down our culture with the music videos that are just so fast and quick. You got MTV music video directors now directing feature films, Tom. What's that tell you?
Yeah.
For the 18-year-olds who grew up on this, the 25-year-olds who grew up on this, they can't take a film that takes its time to tell its story because they have attention deficit problems of some kind.
But isn't that the same thing though? If you've got people like, for instance, going back to the classic, the people that you're talking about. I mean, Steven Spielberg started out making shorts.
Right.
And aren't music videos almost just like the shorts of today?
Well, but it depends. It's how it tells its story. MTV created very quick editing, and young people, a lot of younger people today, so I've read, won't watch something if it has a slower build up to it because they find it their attention span is shortened. Mm-hmm. Short attention span theater. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's really true. And you see, like in our schools, you hear this epidemic of ADD and ADHD. Where did that come from? You know.
I mean, it started before that. I mean, you go back to the old Laugh-In TV shows.
Right.
I mean, Laugh-In was all of a sudden, Laugh-In was boom, boom, boom,
blackouts.
boom, boom.
They called them blackouts.
And which hadn't had prior to that. I look at
the jokes.
I know, yeah, but I look at some old TV shows now. Like if I look like at old Ed Sullivan shows, the Beatles.
Right,
I saw a complete showing of the Beatles' first show, and it just the camera angles so long, so slow, and now camera shots are boom, 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 boom. But then it was like, okay, we'll hold on this guy for 5 minutes, and we'll hold on that guy for 3 minutes, and we'll do that, you know. So it has changed.
I prefer the latter, not the former. Mm-hmm. I think that the you have to tell your story, and when I look at that, I love that. I just recently picked up the Blu-ray of Help and Hard Day's Night, which I love. And you look at those films, and the editing of those movies was done in the old style, but it's still the Beatles. It still holds up, and I think, and it's got music videos within the films, as you know, that they stop and sing their songs into the story, and it works. And it's not quick 8-frame attention deficit disorder film editing that causes epilepsy. It's done in the traditional style. And it kind of started that trend. They're kind of the forerunner, you might say, of MTV. But MTV, and a lot of people put the blame at their feet, but they created this idea that you have to tell it boom, 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 real quick. Otherwise, people are going to be bored. And you see that even in television. The late Tom Snyder, I watched the Tomorrow Show, and of course his later incarnation in the late 90s, where he was saying how he made this argument very well, better than I could make it. He says, now you see on the end of TV shows, on network television, even cable to some extent, as the end credits roll, they'll squeeze them over to the left side and roll them really fast and say, next, 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 next. What's coming next? And you'll see, even when you're watching a show, coming bottom of the screen, next. Yeah. It even cuts into what you're trying to watch. It's like it can never be fast enough. And it's not doing our culture and our kids any good at all because it becomes so impatient. And like I said, we have this almost epidemic of ADD.
What I love about doing these podcasts is that very thing you're talking about.
Right.
Because if I was on the radio doing this, it'd be like, okay, my guest is Bruce Crawford. We're talking about movies. Boom, boom, boom. Quick answer, give it to me. Right. Boom, then reintroduce who you are.
Sound bites.
Whereas opposed to this, we can have, how long does the story take to tell? And we can tell
the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now you mentioned like the Beatles movies and stuff like that.
Right.
What about the pop culture movies? In other words, okay, so you look at the Beatles movies today and you look back on them fondly, but then again, you're of a generation that you remember when the Beatles movies were coming out as a young kid.
As a child, yeah.
Okay, now, what about like the Miley Cyrus movies or the Justin Bieber movies that are out today? I mean, are they just, no?
No.
No?
There's not.
No, okay. Now tell me why not without sounding like an old man saying, well, back in my day,
in the 70s. Well, it's all about talent. It's all about, you have to have that talent. I don't care how popular it is. There has to be some artistic merit to it. There has to be a socially redeeming value of some kind. And if there's no socially redeeming value in it, whether it be music or films or television, whatever it is, then it's not going to have, it can be hot, flash in the pan, and it will not last. It won't have the staying power. That's really what it boils down to. Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus doing a movie. Well, I can't say what their talents are like in the film because I haven't seen any of their films. But chances are it would not be same as like we said, Help and A Hard Day's Night, simply because if they don't have the gravitas, if the talent isn't really there, the long-range talent, the talent that can hold the test of time, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, and in all honesty, the movies the Beatles made, Richard Lester, I mean, he was making some great movies beforehand. Right. He wasn't just,
he had the talent.
Yeah,
the talent was there from the beginning.
Yeah. What about thinking about all the movies and all the stuff? And you've been around a long time. You've met a lot of people in the film industry.
This.
You've met some very successful people, some very talented people,
legends.
Yeah, okay, and you have. Is there a common thread through all of this? In other words, if you look at somebody and say, yeah, I know why they're great because they've got the same qualities that somebody else had, or is it all unique?
Well, That's a good question. It's a little bit of both. I think there are some common links that these people all have, but they're all also unique individuals in their own right, in the sense that there's things about that make their success a little different than the others. What I think I've seen consistently in these people, and those that have responded well to me when I've asked them to come back and join us at our events here in Omaha, and they connect with me, and I see that in them, is this tenacity, this never give up. That's, I think, the connecting thing that I see, this thing that brings their success, is they just don't give up. Not that they're deluded in thinking that they're, they just don't, people, if I'm not successful because people haven't discovered me yet, I think they have this tenacity, this never give up attitude. And as far as the talent goes, it's innate. You can't go to school, you can't go to any college and get an art degree, and that doesn't make you Michelangelo or Picasso. It's not going to happen. Either you have it or you don't. And I think that the talent is there in an individual, and the tenacity is there, along with some luck and breaks, certainly. Then I've noticed in these people, that's the connecting thing I've seen in all of them, is that they have that never give up attitude, and they knew they had something they can offer. They were not deluded. They didn't think that they were, they didn't all have this, they're thinking they were Rembrandt when they could barely draw a straight line. You know what I'm saying? They weren't self-deluded. They were not self-deluded people.
So they may obviously have a big ego to be doing that sort of thing. Well, you got to have a big ego, but they're realistic about their talents.
Well, I think ego gets thrown around a lot. I think, what's big ego and ego, someone who's egotistical? I think of someone who's egotistical, someone who builds himself up bigger than they actually are. They can't deliver. They're a balloon full of hot air. They have nothing. They can't back it up. You see what I'm saying? They can't back up. I'm this, and this, and then you see their credentials, and their credentials don't hold up with their ego. Right. But the people I've seen that I've tried to model myself after as well, who've led me and I've tried to be like, emulate, like the late Mr. Herman and Mr. Harryhausen particularly, is have that self-confidence. I don't know if it's a big ego so much, but sometimes that takes the wrong rap. You've got to have a strong, healthy ego. You can't get out of bed and face the day, Yeah. And believe in yourself, and not to the point where you think you're better than anybody else, that's for sure. But that's what I've seen this come across from them is this belief in themselves, and as far as ego goes, is to, don't let anybody talk you out of it. Don't let them knock you down. You can pick yourself right back up again. And believe in yourself, but not to the point where you think you're better than anybody else. When you do that, then you're an egotist, and then things work against you, and they pull the rug out from underneath you. That's what I've seen.
Well, people that I've worked with in comedy that are truly, great, comedians. I've opened for Jerry Seinfeld, Sam Kinison, people like that, and yeah, they have strong, personalities,
right,
to do what they do. But I've also found that. Anybody that's really talented like that is also generous with their talent.
Yes.
In other words, that they were very helpful with me in my career. They were not like just, get away. They're actually very generous in their talent.
That's true. And like I said, I've tried my best to follow in the footsteps of the people that who have influenced me greatly, like Ray Harryhausen, like we said. A humble, decent man, strong personality, that he knew what he believed in, he knew what he could do. And he knew he was good at what he did, but not to the point where he thought he was better than anybody else. That's the difference. And he was generous with his time. He was generous with his talent. He was generous with his influence on me. He was generous with his input and his support, and to be kind to everyone. And that's what I know you've always been very kind to me, Tom, and I've always appreciated that. And I think when you're kind to people, it's true. It sounds silly, but it's true. You get out what you put in. If you put in decency towards others, you get it right back. If you throw out big ego and stepping on people and being a jerk and an ASS to people, it's going to come back to haunt you.
I want to get back to what you were saying before about these big blockbuster movies, the ADD enhancing, type movies. On the other hand, I'm thinking about somebody like Alexander Payne, who's had tremendous success with,
more or less.
Maybe not a Spielberg success, but every movie that he's done, I think, it has made money. It's been critically acclaimed, and you're making a face. You're not a big Alexander Payne fan?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I think that I think of some films today as being, I like several of his movies very much. Particularly About Schmidt was a very moving film to me. No, he's a very talented person. But I think of contemporary filmmakers, I just don't identify with them as well as I do with the people from the past. That's the only.
Yeah, but I mean, the people in the past that you're talking about are people that were like from the way past. I mean, we're not.
Well, no, there's people living today.
But these movies though were movies that came out when you were a real little kid.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think of Animal House with John Landis. I brought back. That's a contemporary film. But
but okay. But you mentioned we were talking about Vertigo earlier. Vertigo or
the great class. Well, see, the thing is though, you have to. You can't go forward unless you can respect and preserve the past. You have to preserve the past. It has to be preserved and has to be looked back upon. It's there's a great line, and I think it's on the head of the doorway as you go into the archives. He goes, "What's past is prologue," the National Archives, and that's what I really believe. But there are contemporary films that are made, and Payne's made some really darn good movies. But I think of a lot of contemporary filmmakers, unless you're a Spielberg or a Lucas, there's very few exceptions that I can really identify with myself.
Really?
Personally.
Okay. So, in other words, if you look at something like you mentioned About Schmidt or the latest one, Nebraska.
I haven't had a chance to see that.
Okay. I'm just thinking about these are more of a, it takes a while to tell the story. It's not.
I like that.
It's not. It is more of a story, character-driven movie,
right.
Which you tend to seem that you like. But
right.
you'd rather look at the character-driven movies of the past. You love the history of that.
Well, I do, but I also like certain films today. Like I said, Inception, Adjustment Bureau, and also thought who just tragically died. I don't know when this podcast will be broadcast, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, who played in Capote. I love that film. That's a contemporary film. He was brilliant in that film. I really enjoyed that. My favorite living filmmakers today, my favorite directors and filmmakers today that are living today that I love. Besides, I enjoy Spielberg's films like Lincoln, but I really love Peter Weir's films too. Remember his films, don't you?
Is that RoboCop? Who's Peter Weir?
No, it's Paul Verhoeven. Peter Weir did The Year of Living Dangerously and Witness. Those are superb movies. I love those films, and they're contemporary films or modern films. He's probably my favorite living director. I have to tell you, would be Peter Weir, the Australian. He doesn't make very many movies, but I really enjoy his films a great deal.
You mentioned Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that. Did he ever make a bad movie? Was there ever a character that he didn't just?
Yeah, he was.
Grab.
So tragic. 46 years old. Heroin.
Yeah.
It's just so sad.
The idea.
His Capote was brilliant.
Yeah, I never saw that movie.
It's well worth getting. It's just 5 or 6 years old. I have it on DVD. It's an outstanding movie. It'll blow you away. He became Capote.
Yeah,
and there are very few actors like that today. See, he's from the old school. He's a younger man, 46, but he played like the old school actors, the character actors. He could be any character. Very few people like that today in films. Very, very few. Tom Hanks is an example of that. He can be a leading man and a character. He's brilliant. I see Saving Mr. Banks is a modern, brand new film. I love that movie. That should be Best Picture of the Year as far as I'm concerned. Didn't get hardly anything. Mm-hmm. So the Oscars don't really mean anything to people, or me anymore. They don't have quite the verve they used to have anyway. They're so political. But he was so good as Walt Disney. I highly recommend your listeners, if they hear this, to see that movie. It really blew me away. But The Making of Mary Poppins kind of works both schools. It's old school, the films I would love in the past, and it's made today by people today like Emma Thompson, Tom Hanks. Superb movie. Tom.
You mentioned Capote. I remember one time Capote was on the Carson Show.
And, I saw him on there too.
Yeah, and they were talking about actors, and he made a point about actors being, basically just empty shells. The really good actors are empty shells where they can. If you don't have a script in front of them, they can't carry on a conversation. They are people that...
There's some.
Yeah, and great actors like that just absorb the characters and become that person instead of being themselves. Do you think that's true?
To a certain point. There are others, though, who are like raconteurs. Charlton Heston was a very, very deep person to speak with about multiple subjects. And Cary Grant, I think, was like that, too. And James Stewart clearly was an actor of much more depth than just being the character. But
you look at those, and I'll put Jack Nicholson in that same category.
Yeah, exactly. You
look at them, and let's take Nicholson for example. With the exception of About Schmidt, which is what I loved about that movie, is that it completely stripped the veneer off of Nicholson.
It was a very touching movie to me.
But whether Nicholson is playing the Joker, whether Nicholson is doing a bucket list, or as good as it gets, whatever it may be, no matter what he's in, there's always that Jack Nicholson veneer, that Jack Nicholson, personality that comes through no matter who the character is.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because that's what Mr. Harryhausen once said about his films. When he would cast his films, he used a lot of English and American actors together because of the type of story they told. And he said that the American actors tend to play themselves, and the Brits can play anything. And the Brits are actually the superior actors overall. But there are some exceptions to American actors. But American actors tend to play themselves. When you say about Jack Nicholson, well, he's playing himself. Mm-hmm. In every movie he's in, he's playing himself.
I thought the same thing when you talk about these personalities like Charlton Heston was also, very, Charlton Heston, that was his character.
But he could be lost in a character, though, in Planet of the Apes and in Will Penny. And he could play multi-level things. He was an exception to that rule in some ways. and he could play the greater than life, Ben-Hur and what have you, and El Cid. But at the same time, he could play small too. I mean, you see him in a film that doesn't get played very often. It's called Counterpoint. Great film. He played a conductor of an orchestra during World War II, trying to get out of Germany. Superb film, and but typecast in a sense as a greater than life superhero, not superhero, but a larger than life type man. But you see the wide range. Sometimes it doesn't get enough attention as I think it deserves.
Do you think? Okay, going back to Philip Seymour Hoffman, I wrote down the list of countless actors that have had substance abuse issues. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's more prevalent in that line of work than maybe in general society, and that we only just notice it more because these people are so high profile?
That in the music industry, both. Too.
Yeah.
And even stand-up comedians, as we sadly know, Belushi and Sam Kinison, of course, was killed in a tragic car wreck. And
but he had cocaine in his system when he did. I mean, and he battled his demons.
I think these people sometimes they tend to play other people because they can't be the person that they are. They can't live with themselves. It's hard to live with themselves, so they get lost in other characters. They can be somebody else for a while. I think and that goes with musicians too. When they're performing, they're somebody else. That's them playing it, but they're lost in their work. So I think you make a good point. I think in the creative world, many people in films and television and acting and music, there's a lot, I think more than the average than the general public. I think you're probably right.
Okay, today. The movies today are different than they have been in the past, but there's always that same commonality. Mm-hmm. Like you said, go watch the movie, go in a group. It's a great date night, that sort of a thing.
Right.
But now with the kids now, I mean, they're used to watching so much on their phones and the technology being what it is. Where do you see the movie industry being in like 15, 20 years from now?
Well, that's a really good question.
That's why I'm here, Bruce, to ask the good questions. Well,
I'm glad you do because they don't get asked enough.
Yeah.
Really, they really don't get asked enough in the media because people seem to go with the flow. I think, Tom, who just thought 15 years ago it'd be this 3D craze again? Although I think it's starting to burn out a little bit because not everybody can afford $15, $18 to see just a movie. You don't get to meet a celebrity; you get to see just the movie. That's a really good question because I really don't know what to tell you. I think that it's going in both directions. It's going large and it's going small. It's going into iPhones, like you said, and Kindles, whatever they can watch movies on these little screens. And then it's also going the other extreme. We're bringing back the giant screen theaters again, like the IMAX, which I love, that the great big screen, which is what most of these films, many films, are designed to be seen that way. The movie Gravity, if you had a chance to see that was a superb film. That's a modern new film that I can get behind. I love that movie. Sandra Bullock, it's a one-person show. It's a Sandra Bullock film. It's her show, and that's the best she's ever done. Have you seen it? I've
not seen that yet. And,
go see that.
And one of the reasons I haven't is because does it really have a plot?
It's great. It's superb.
Really, because it seems to me from the previews, the way they were selling it, it was, okay, here's Sandra Bullock and George Clooney floating around in space. Right. It looks like it'd be like an orgy for the eyes, as far as the cinematography and everything.
It was riveting. It was. It just sucked you in, and it just you were emotionally wrenched when you were done with this thing. Like, God, I'll see her get over. Not in the negative way. It just was so compelling. This woman by herself, lost in space, trying to get back to her. And you think, well, that's been done before. It sounds so cliche. It sounds like a CGI fest. Well, there was CGI, clear special effects, clearly, obviously. But not this nonstop 8-frame attention deficit. It was slowly building its story, told its story methodically. I was blown away by it. There are people who are not science fiction fans whatsoever, writing in the papers and TV and what have you, and we're just giving it, you saw 4-star reviews. It's just, you've got to see this film. And we saw it in IMAX 3D, which is really the best way to see it because you're in space. You're there. That's where 3D IMAX works. That's why I see in the future, either being really small or really big. And this is an example where it was like an old-fashioned movie, like I like, old-fashioned. It was telling its story. It was bigger than life. It was on a huge screen. It was in 3D. And Clooney's not in a whole lot, but he plays a character that's important. But I don't want to give it away or ruin it for you. But I highly recommend you see that film. That was the best film of the year. I think maybe that, and of course, Mr. Banks is not nominated for anything, but said Mr. Banks. But you would really like it. I'd be surprised if you didn't like it.
Yeah, I'll check that one out. Think about seeing that, then you think about cable or DVD or whatever, Blu-ray. What about Netflix as far as making movies? You talked about, it's all about telling stories. And again, we're talking cinema here and the classics, and you love, the old classic movies.
Right.
But as I'm looking at the future here, and you see what Netflix is doing, where they can take a full story, a long story, and, let it develop with House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, or something like that.
Right.
The on-demand, when people want it, as they want it. Do you see more of Hollywood going in that direction?
Well, those miniseries you see are really big, on the HBO. There's a lot of that coming on. A lot of network TV is getting so much competition. You see, like The Walking Dead on AMC. It's got an ongoing series, and it's a good question because I think that it is moving in that direction. You can clearly see that's happening. People are there's a lot of people are starved for quality entertainment, and if the movies don't bring it, then these miniseries, like you're saying, on the pay cable will fill that niche.
How can they be starved for quality entertainment when everywhere you go there's entertainment at you?
But it's not quality. It's some of it's like you eat a lot of. This is how Ray Bradbury said it to me one time. I'll never forget how he said it. He goes, "Today's films," he said, "are like Chinese food. You eat a whole bunch of it, you get filled, and 2 hours later you're hungry again." He goes, "You can go see a film and walk out, and half hour later you forgot the name of the movie." That's actually happened before. I forgot the name of the movie I just watched.
Yeah.
Now that's the point. We're inundated with entertainment, but it's not. There's nothing there. There's no there. You're seeing it, but there's no substance. There's no weight. There's no gravitas, unless it's a Lincoln or something, like I just said. Or Saving Mr. Banks, which I thought was something you'll never forget. Or Gravity. Those films are the ones you walk away from. That really left an impression. I'll remember that. So many films today, you walk away from it and you don't remember what the heck you even saw. You didn't name the movie. Now, how bad is that, But that's how Bradbury put it several years ago. I thought that was brilliant. It's like Chinese food. An hour or two later, you're hungry again.
Okay. What is the most overrated movie of all time? I'll give you my answer, but I want to hear yours.
Oh boy, that's hard to say. Overrated. Well, there are people who think Gone with the Wind's the most overrated film ever made, and because it's still number one for a lot of people. Citizen Kane, they think, is the most overrated film ever made.
That's what I would pick.
And some people see Star Wars as the most overrated film ever made. But they have that. I see the argument. Citizen Kane is a great movie, but it's not the greatest movie ever made.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's a
great movie, though.
It seems like that's an answer that people give because they want to appear to be intelligent.
Well, because I'm an elite. I know.
Yes,
I know much better than you because I'm elite, and the elite know more than you.
Well, now we go back to my beef with comedies. Mm-hmm. Because you talk about the Academy Awards. With the exception of Woody Allen, with Annie Hall, has there been a comedy that's won an Academy Award? No,
I don't think so. No.
And if you know anything, I mean, comedy. Do it well is incredibly difficult to do.
Well, what Olivier always said. He goes, dying is easy, comedy is hard.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at like the old airplane movies. Okay, you take a look at the old airplane movies, and you realize, I mean, those things were just hilarious. Mm-hmm. But then you look at something like Porky's 4, which may be a similar genre, and you realize how bad that could be if you don't do it well.
The film that really got the crazy zany airplane type films going was a film I did a tribute to 8 years ago was Stanley Kramer's It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which is people either love it or hate it. I think it's one of the funniest films I've ever seen in my life. It's a laugh riot. I just got the new Criterion Blu-ray restoration. It's just fantastic. I had Marvin Kaplan back for an event. He played the hapless gas station owner who Jonathan Winters destroyed his gas station. He was a wonderful comedian too, is a wonderful comedian, still living, thankfully, and he came back as my guest. And that was and I never saw in my life, only rare exceptions, where you're sitting in the theater, Tom, and watching Mad, 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 Mad World, and we had Mr. Kaplan who just gave a talk about the movie, full theater. And the laughter was so loud you couldn't even hear the soundtrack. You couldn't even hear the movie for a few seconds as people were laughing. You missed the next word because they were laughing so loud. Those films, and that set the stage for what came later with Airplane. That was definitely Mel Brooks. We're talking about Mel Brooks. The zany comedy of my favorite Mel Brooks movies is The Producers. The original Producers is the first movie I've ever seen in my life, I think, along with W.C. Fields' It's a Gift. But you're right. Comedy does not get the respect it's deserved to.
No, it really doesn't, which frustrates me because it is maybe that's why I like the Golden Globes, and maybe that's why the Golden Globes are getting more credibility now.
Exactly,
because they do honor all all forms of
drama, having separate categories. Exactly.
Yeah. You don't have to be a British prostitute with one leg and epilepsy to get an Academy Award.
That's the way. Yeah, the Academy Awards. They've moved them way up from mid-late April to almost the end of February, and because their thunder was being stolen by all these other and more relevant likes of the Golden Globes seem to be more even-handed and recognizing areas that weren't before. And let's face it, there's only 5,000 people that vote the Academy Awards. It's not what it used to be. It's had a lot of its power taken from it. A lot of its thunder's been stolen, and they are very. Some people think they could be somewhat elitist and snobby, and like you just said, a one-legged French woman, or whatever how you phrase it. A film that maybe 50 people will see, and because the elite know better than you, because their noses in the air.
But you see, that goes back to the old style of Hollywood, which you honor and respect so much. And I want to get to your events in a second here, but you honor and respect the old style of Hollywood back when stars weren't all over TMZ, right, and you didn't know all of their foibles, right, and there was something sort of special and unique and right, extravagant about that, and life's not that way anymore.
No. Good question. That's it's called class, and that's what's missing. There's a lot of class. This is the age of, as Ray used to say, this is the age of the slob. We celebrate the slob. We celebrate. Not that you can't have that in certain movies to be funny, like in Animal House, but which was hilarious. But just in everything now, it's about explosions and slobs, in all movies, not just comedies. And that's where we've come now. The age of class, a lot of the class is missing today, and it's become a classless society.
Let's talk a little bit about your events then, because you do these great events that honor the classic films. Right. What do you do? Tell people about that, what they are, and how you came about doing them.
Well, what we do is we do a one-night-only special screening of a classic film, and I go back from the 30s to the late 70s, so it's pretty wide-ranging, somewhat contemporary in some cases. Like American Graffiti and Animal House are definitely contemporary in that respect, although they're older, but they're still not ancient. And bring back a celebrity guest, either someone who's a star of the film, very famous star, or filmmaker or director, or someone who may be related to them, like Stephen Bogart, for example, the son of Humphrey Bogart, because obviously Humphrey's been gone forever. And make a big event out of it. We have a special screening of the film, have them come on stage and speak. In some cases, we unveil artwork, or in latest cases, we've had a commemorative postal envelope and stamp honoring the films, which is a great honor to have the Postal Service acknowledge what we do, and have them autographed afterwards in some cases, and have our guests come out and speak, even take some questions and answers from the audience a couple of times. In some cases, our celebrity will come out and speak. Our film person would be a star or whoever we have from the movie. And that way they get a chance to see them in person, maybe interact with them a little bit, and get to see a classic film on the big screen again. And it's all for charity, too, on top of that. We raise funds for the charities as well.
Okay, and some of the movies that you've done in the past are?
Well, like we said, we just did in November, that's Great Escape. And we'll do showmanship, as you know. We'll have people in World War II uniforms, and we have miniature dioramas of World War II battlefields in some cases. Steve McQueen's replica of his motorcycle used, we had on display, which is way cool. It's more than you're just going to see a movie. You're getting to see a celebrity, legendary filmmaker. Some cases our guests will autograph afterwards. Some guests have not, but most of them, a lot of them do, depending on the guest. But they get a chance to see them on stage, maybe do a Q&A, and see a classic film on the big screen, and raise some funds for charity as well.
Last question. Explain to me, if you can, why you've got such a passion for movies.
Well, gosh, where do I start? Again, I think it's a form of destiny. That's I don't want to sound ethereal to your audience, but I do think there's a sense of a destiny that I think that comes in our lives. I really believe that, because I'm from a small town. I'm from Nebraska City originally, and it's a town of 7,000 people. And when I saw the Jules Verne adventure movie, fantasy classic, Mysterious Island, which I saw as a little boy, I fell in love with the music. I couldn't read. I was only 5 years old. And my parents read to me, wow, where'd that music come from? And they told me who the composer was and this and that. And where'd the great creatures in the film come from? And they got the name. As a little boy, back in the early 60s, I thought, I got to find a way to know these people. I want to know them somehow or connect with them. I didn't know how, but I wanted to. Yeah. And then this great music I love so much, and my grandmother got me an LP record of the great Hitchcock scores, and I saw this name, it was Bernard Herrmann, I thought, that name, I see that in all these movies I'm seeing, I see in Vertigo and Psycho and North by Northwest and The Day the Earth Stood Still and Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and The Twilight Zone and Fahrenheit 451, all these great movies, Journey to the Center of the Earth, I thought, that name, and then Ray Harryhausen, all these great special effects, And make a long story short, that's how it came about. I fell in love with these individuals in their films, and I just had to find a way to connect to them. I didn't know how, but I found a way. I just started networking before they called it networking. I just call people on the telephone and chew their ear off, and they connect me because I knew the passion was there and they knew my sincerity was there. And like I said, when I met Mr. Harryhausen in 1982, and we became really close friends. Who would have ever believed that? That's so surreal, And Mr. Herrmann and his great impact on the world of music, and that's where the passion came from as a child. I saw these movies and something just connected with me, Tom. I just thought these are spectacular. People have got to know more about this. I got to know how this came about. Who are these people? How do you do this? Not to make the film so much. That wasn't really my passion, but it was to my mentor, in a sense, another mentor and friend, Robert Osborne, Turner Classic Movies. I'm kind of like his illegitimate son, you might say, because he's I'm sure you know who he is, and he's just a great man. He's got class and elegance. And that's what we do at our events. We have some folks of us in a tuxedo, and the tuxedo is not for pretentiousness. It's just for fun. Let's add some class. It's because we're in a society of a lot of slobs these days. Add a little class to it and create a night that we can honor these great movies and meet these great people and do it in a classy way. And that's how it got started for me as a kid, is that I thought, I felt this sense I must preserve the past. Because like I said, that great inscription across the doorway as you walk into the National Archives in Washington, D.C., what's past is prologue, and that's absolutely true. Because if you don't preserve the past, people won't know their history, and we have to, and the Turner Classic Movies is one of the most popular networks on cable television worldwide, and the Turner Classic Film Festival, which they don't just show like I do, one movie event and one great guest, they do 24 films over 3 days and have tons of celebrities come. Of course, it's in Hollywood where they can do that. They get 25,000 people in 3.5 days. It's incredible. That shows the popularity for these great films is definitely there, and I'm not alone.
Thanks, Bruce, for joining us here on TomBecka.com. TomBecka.com is a community of everyday people with interesting stories, lifestyles, events, hobbies, overcoming adversity, and, you never quite know who you're going to meet here, which is why you got to come back every week and spend some time browsing around and checking out all the fascinating people that you're going to find here, and you just might not find in your everyday life. Hope you'll be back again next week. Again, thanks for the email, thanks for the tweets, the follows, thanks for the comments on Facebook, thanks for spreading the word and sharing this in your community. And we'll see you soon here on TomBecka.com.